Hi everyone, and welcome to my final project presentation. For this video, I'll be diving into the topic of victim-offender relationships, an issue that is deeply rooted in our society, yet often misunderstood or overlooked. I'll explore what these relationships are, the risks that increase their likelihood, and how our criminal justice system can respond more effectively. Throughout this presentation, you'll also see graphs, case examples, and other visuals that help paint a clearer picture of the issue. Let's get started. First, let's define what we mean by victim-offender relationships. These are the personal relationships that exist between a victim and the individual who harms them. They're most relevant in crimes that involve interpersonal trauma, like rape, assault, and domestic violence, where emotional, cognitive, and behavioral responses are shaped not just by the trauma itself, but by who the perpetrator is. Victim-offender relationships fall into several categories. Acquaintance relationships involve someone the victim knows casually, like a coworker, neighbor, or friend of a friend. Intimate relationships, such as current or former romantic partners, are often at the center of domestic violence cases. Stranger relationships, though less common than the media would have us believe, refer to cases where the victim did not know the offender at all. Finally, family relationships include abuse or violence within the home or extended family. These dynamics make the victim's experience more complex, especially when emotions like trust, love, or loyalty are involved. Now let's take a look at just how far-reaching this issue really is. According to the National Intimate Partner Violence Survey, 42% of women and 40% of men report experiencing physical abuse by an intimate partner. These aren't just statistics, these are lived realities for millions of people. On a broader scale, 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men will experience intimate partner violence during their lifetime. These numbers show that IPV doesn't discriminate by gender, though women often experience more severe outcomes. What's more alarming is that 62% of all violent crimes are committed by someone the victim already knows. This challenges the common narrative that danger usually comes from strangers. It most often comes from someone close. There's also something known as the victim-offender overlap. This concept recognizes that in many marginalized communities, individuals may be both victims and offenders over time, often due to the environment and systematic conditions that push people into cycles of trauma and violence. So why do these relationships form, and what puts someone at risk? On an individual level, people who've experienced past trauma, especially during childhood, may be more vulnerable. For instance, someone who grew up witnessing domestic violence may normalize it in adulthood, either as a victim or perpetrator. Mental health challenges such as PTSD, depression, or personality disorder can also play a role. Additionally, substance abuse can impair judgment and escalate conflict, increasing the risk of both victimization and offending. These are not excuses, but critical pieces of the puzzle when we look at the root causes of interpersonal violence. But individual factors don't exist in a vacuum. Environmental risk factors can make someone more likely to fall into or stay in a dangerous relationship. Poverty, for example, can limit a person's ability to leave an abusive partner due to financial dependency. People involved in criminal networks or gangs may be exposed to normalized violence, and a lack of education can prevent individuals from recognizing what healthy relationships may look like. Often, these environments create pressure to stay silent, especially when seeking help, could put someone further at risk. It is important to understand how someone's surroundings can reinforce cycles of harm. Next, we need to zoom out even further. Systematic risk factors are failures built into the very structures that are supposed to protect people. One major issue is the lack of legal protections in certain states or jurisdictions. For example, not all areas provide easy access to protective orders, or they may have policies that make it difficult for certain victims, like undocumented individuals, to seek help. Reporting is also incredibly low, often due to fear of retaliation, disbelief, or lack of trust in the justice system. And when victims do come forward, they often face a cold or inadequate response from law enforcement. These are the systematic problems that make violence harder to escape and justice harder to attain. Let's take a closer look at law enforcement. Officers on the front lines don't always have the training they need to respond effectively to IPV cases. Many departments lack trauma-informed approaches, which means officers may not recognize signs of fear, control, or manipulation that don't show up as physical injuries. In some cases, unconscious biases led officers to minimize or dismiss complaints, especially if the victim doesn't fit the expected profile. This can lead to dangerous misjudgments like arresting the victim instead of the abuser or assuming a situation is a mutual conflict when it's really coercive control. Once cases reach the courts, more challenges appear. Sentencing for violent crimes, especially IPV, can vary widely even when the crimes are similar. Some offenders get probation, while others serve years. That inconsistency can shake public trust in the legal system. Delays caused by court backlogs can also traumatize victims further. Imagine waiting over a year for justice, all while dealing with fear, isolation, or ongoing harassment. These delays send a message that the system is not equipped to prioritize victim safety. At the policy level, funding is often one of the biggest issues. Victim support services like shelters, legal aid, or counseling programs are often underfunded or unavailable. That means fewer beds for survivors escaping abuse, longer waits for legal representation, and fewer resources to rebuild their lives. Even when laws are passed to protect victims, like restraining orders or mandatory arrest policies, these laws are only effective if they're enforced. Unfortunately, enforcement is inconsistent, which again undermines the safety net victims are supposed to have. So, how do we move forward? One major step is improving law enforcement responses. This means implementing trauma-informed policing practices, training officers to recognize fear, responses, emotional distress, and other signs of hidden abuse. It also means mandatory training on domestic violence, including culture sensitivity, so responses can be tailored and effective. We also need stronger legal protections, quicker processing of restraining orders, better enforcement of no-contact laws, and tougher penalties for repeat abusers. When the system takes these actions seriously, it sends a strong message to both the victims and offenders. On a community level, we can invest in prevention. This means expanding access to shelters, funding peer-supported programs, and introducing education programs about healthy relationships in schools and communities. Teaching young people about consent, communication, and respect can prevent abusive dynamics from taking hold in the first place. Technology also holds promise. We can improve databases to track repeat offenders and create more integrated systems that allow law enforcement and service providers to share critical information more effectively. These tech upgrades can be life-saving in urgent situations. To put this into context, I want to talk briefly about the case of Gabby Petito. Gabby was a young woman whose disappearance and death made national headlines in 2021. Before her death, she and her fiancé were stopped by police after a witness reported a possible domestic disturbance. Despite visible signs of distress and emotional harm, Gabby was not treated as a potential victim. Instead, the officers categorized the situation as mutual conflict and no further protection was offered. This was a moment when an intervention might have saved her life. The case received massive attention on social media, where people pointed out red flags and failures in the police response. Gabby's case is tragic, but it's also a powerful example of why trauma-informed policing and early interventions are so important. We cannot afford to miss the signs. In closing, victim-offender relationships are not just a personal issue, they're a public issue. When these cases go unrecognized or unaddressed, the effects ripple through families, communities, and generations. Change won't come from one solution. It will come from a combination of education, policy reform, and cultural awareness. By shining a light on these dynamics and taking them seriously, we have a real chance to improve safety, justice, and healing for countless individuals. Awareness is the first step, and I hope this video has contributed in some small way toward that goal. Thank you for watching.